Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today I am reviewing a new game called Adventurous. Let's roll it. So I just want to give a disclaimer before I start. I did receive this copy of Adventurous from Dawnfist Games in order to do my review. I have received no other compensation except for the physical copy of the book as well as the PDF. These are my free and fair thoughts as they always are. I also want to shout out my patrons because their support helps keep this channel going. It helps me back Kickstarters, pay for website upkeep, and pick up products that I may want to review later on. Your support is awesome. I am thankful for it. And if you'd like to join that community, you can look at the link in the description below. Let's get to the review. So this is the initial game released by Dawnfist Games. It is written by Sebastian Grabne, who hails from Sweden. He wanted to write a fantasy adventure game that was designed from the ground up for new players in order to introduce his friends to the hobby. But as he was looking around what was available in the landscape, nothing really clicked, so he decided to write his own and has been designing it for a few years now. He actually ended up writing a game that is fast, flexible, and a great entryway into the hobby. Let's take a look at how the characters are created. So characters have 5 attributes: strength, dexterity, willpower, knowledge, and charisma. And you get your attribute scores by point buy system, and each attribute's value is actually the number of dice you roll for checks inside the game. There are 3 races in the game: human, dwarf, and elf. They have absolutely no mechanical impact on the game whatsoever. If you're going to be moving more towards more modern sensibilities in the description of your different character types, they might want to move to ancestries in the future. That's a little bit of a language disconnect from Sweden over to America or the English-speaking world. There are also 8 classes in the game, which allow you to play a wide range of types for fantasy adventuring. You have the warrior and a rogue who slinks around in shadows, a wizard, a paladin who is the righteous warrior, a hunter, your ranger type, a cleric, religious type, a warlock who seeks power, and a druid who is just out in communing in nature and tries to unleash that in order to push back against the ravages of civilization. A lot of great ways that you can play this game. Classes are also really distinct. Each has a primary attribute that's going to be linked to their class abilities and talents. That's what you're going to be rolling for most of them. Each class at start has 3 abilities. You have an at-will power, a once per encounter power, and a daily power. And each class also has 6 talents from which you can choose. But you're never going to get all 6 talents. At level 5, a character will have 3 of these talents unlocked, and that's a way that you're going to differentiate one warrior from another warrior or one wizard to another wizard. The other cool thing about this game is that there are no spell list or special mechanics for casting. Spell effects are either class talents or they are class abilities. So you're not looking up a whole new way to play the game if you want to play a caster. It's all flavor. I love this. It gets away from kind of the gonzo magic that you have in Easy D6, but again, it's really simple for new players, and that's what the game is designed to do. The way the system balances out is that the character classes are all balanced one to another, and yet they are unique. And I love that. And you can differentiate one from another based on the talents that you take. The game also has a slot-based encumbrance system that is not changed from one character to another. You have 8 slots, and normal-sized items are 1 slot, larger-sized items are 2 slots, and then you have this neat mechanic in the game for an equipment type called supplies. It is a generic item which uses 1 slot, but it's kind of in a state of quantum flux. It is whatever you need at the moment. But they are expendable, so when you use them, they poof and go away. So if you need to repair your armor after a fight, that's going to require supplies. If you're lighting a torch to see in the dark, that's going to require supplies. You're picking a lock, you need lock picks. Well, that's a supply. If you're going to eat rations and drink water for the day, well, that's also supplies. And because you are limited to 8 slots, that means a balancing act. What are you going to do with the supplies that you can carry? Do you repair your armor so you can go deeper into the delve? Or are you going to make sure that you're going to be able to light a torch at some point in the future so you do not get lost in the dark? Or do you pick that lock to get treasure or save your last supplies because you're far away from civilization and you want to eat? Supplies become one of the key things of the game and also one of the great things that you can get from an encounter. You're going to be looking to get supplies. So instead of being a mundane drop and like, great, rations, put that in the list. No, no, no. That creature had 3 supplies, and that is a bonanza because you can keep on adventuring. I love the way they handle encumbrance with this limited 8 slots and also that kind of amorphous supply resource that you have that can be anything you want, but you can only carry so many of them. Really, really cool. Now, character advancement is interesting. Page 49 has an advancement table for each class. Each level has different benefits from what they can choose, and you are maxed out at level 5. So you're never getting into superhero style of play, and I'm going to talk about how XP gets awarded in a bit. So checks in this game are very simple, and they are familiar to anyone who has played a dice pool game similar to Free League's Year Zero engine. You roll the number of dice indicated for the attribute that's called for in the check. So if you need to do a strength check, you're going to roll whatever your strength attribute is, that number of dice. If a 5 or a 6 turns up in that roll, that is considered a weak success. If you have multiple 5s or multiple 6s in the roll, that's considered a strong success. And then double 6s can trigger a special condition for abilities or magic items. That can give the group momentum, talk about that in a sec, or it grants the player an experience point that they can use to level up. If you have no 5s or 6s in your dice pool roll, that means a failure, and something is going to happen that drives the story forward. Every dice roll will propel the story forward. So you are not going to be spending 20 minutes staring at doors wondering what you're going to do. Now, the GM determines before the roll which type of a success is required to pass that challenge, and it's usually based on one question. Does this task require some sort of training? If not, you need a weak success in order to succeed, and if it does, you need a strong success in order to succeed. I kind of like that. You also have advantage and disadvantage in this game. Advantage means that you roll an extra die, although you never roll more than 66 for any check. Disadvantage means you roll 1 less die, but you never roll less than 1d6 from a check. So there's no automatic failure unless you need a strong success and you're only rolling 1 die. But in that case, why is your character being the one to try this out? The GM determines when the situation calls for either advantage or disadvantage. So they just say, yeah, this seems like an advantageous situation for you, roll with advantage. Or this doesn't seem to be your day, roll for disadvantage. I like that kind of ruling aspect to GMing Adventurous. Momentum, on the other hand, is a rather interesting concept. It can be activated to re-roll a single die for a check. So if you need a strong success and you don't roll enough 5s or 6s, you can re-roll 1 die to try to get that extra success roll that you need. But the way that it's presented is a bit confusing because the section on momentum says that momentum's active until the party takes any sort of rest. So when it gets triggered, then you're going to have it until the rest. So the whole party has momentum at that point, which is something that I kind of appreciate. It also says that momentum's not something you stockpile, which is also an interesting concept. So you either can get momentum or you don't have momentum. However, it also points out inside the game that some attacks can drain the player's pool of momentum. That makes me think that you can stockpile momentum points, and I'm a little bit confused at that point. So while momentum is a cool mechanic that shows that the group is really gelling and they're moving forward and it gives them a chance to delve deeper into the adventure, it needs to be clarified a little bit in subsequent printings of the book, because I was left just a tad confused. Combat in the game is simple and fast. Your initiative check is a simple pass fail. You make a knowledge check. If you succeed it, you go before your adversaries. If you fail, you go after. It is also not a tactical game. You just move by zone. So everything is really geared for more theater of the mind or just estimated movements if you're using minis. Close is considered melee range. That is anything within 15 feet. Near and far are for your ranged weapons, 65 feet and 150 feet. Subsequently, and then anything that is distant is 300 feet and beyond. Rolling to attack is simple. You're not looking up a creature's AC or anything. You make a strength check for melee and a dex check for ranged, and also your damage is not a roll. Your weapons deal different amounts of damage depending on whether or not you made a weak or a strong success. Strong is usually double a weak success. If you are unarmed, you do 1 point of damage with a weak success and 2 points of damage with a strong success. Now, when you deal damage, that's going to be reduced by your armor rating or a creature's armor rating, and that's going to reduce the amount of damage that is done to the character. However, armor itself can be damaged, and after each combat, anyone who took damage is going to roll a 1d6, and on a result of 1 to 4, that armor or shield, if they have a shield, is going to be damaged. It's going to reduce their durability rating by 1. When that armor or that shield hits 0, it needs to be repaired, and you're going to have to use supplies in order to do it. Ammunition is handled a similar way. After each combat, you're going to roll a 1d4 or 1d6, and on a 1d4, you are going to have to burn 1 supplies in order to keep your arrows in stock for the next fight. I like how simple and fast this is. It really gives itself to engaging gameplay. Massive damage is another option inside the game, which I think is handled really well. And the GM just determines this is a massive damage opportunity. Like if the creature is jumping from a large rock with a huge axe, they're going to get to do massive damage against a character. Or if they're pulling down the cave wall onside a character, that's going to be a massive damage instant. Basically, what that means is the creature is going to do double damage. So you're going to look up the weapon that they're using, and you're going to double the results for strong and weak successes. And if you're just using the environment in order to inflict massive damage on a character, it's 8 points of damage for a weak success and 16 points of damage for a strong success. That might not sound like a lot of damage for someone who is used to a more high power fantasy game or even higher level old school games, because 16 points of damage, that's a blow, but we can deal with it. In Adventurous, you have low HP. You have 10 hit points, no more. And hitting 0 means that you roll in a critical injury table, and there are 3 outcomes. One of them is a chance at utter death. You're just kaput. That's really wild. So there's a lethality to this game that still gives you a chance to pull out miraculously once you get downed. Now, on page 56, there are some really nice combat situation advice that's given. I like it. And the whole setup leads to fast and engaging combat. There are no players sitting around twiddling their thumbs doing nothing for very long. And in addition to all this, there's some really nice and simple NPC and morale mechanics inside the game to handle what these folks do in reaction to combat. It is well done. In addition to regular items inside the game, there's a nice equipment list. You are going to have a nice mix of magic items inside the game. And there are a couple changes that I would probably make to some of these magic items, though. There's a deck of old gods in the game, which is kind of like a deck of many things from the Coastal Wizards type game, or the people who currently own it. There's a couple results in there that make me feel a little bit squeamish, and one of the results means that in order to break a curse, you have to offer a human sacrifice. That would not appear at my table, but in general, the magic items are really cool. Cursed items are absolutely terrific, and there's some cool rules for potion making, and there's a whole list of ingredients that you can grab inside the game. It's really cool. It encourages your players to explore stuff, and I like that very, very much. Adventurous is very much an old school style game. It is geared more towards dungeon crawling, so you want players who are into that sort of role playing game. There is a simple way to track time inside the game. Each action in a dungeon is 10 minutes long, and after each action, you stick a d6 into a central pool on the table. When that pool reaches 6d6, that means 1 hour has passed. And at that point, you need to relight torches, you need to take a rest, and some other cool things. So your supplies are dwindling, and you have a good way of maintaining how long do I have to go without having to keep a real time timer. The pool is going to be used, however, for random encounters. Now, there are two ways to trigger random encounters inside the game. First is anytime players do a reckless action, like create a huge bang inside a dungeon or inside a room, that's going to trigger a random encounter roll right away. And then every hour hit, you're going to roll all six of those dice, and that's going to trigger another random encounter. What you're going to do is you're going to count ones and twos. The more ones and the more twos that you have, the more serious the consequence of that action is going to happen, or the more serious the consequence of you being in the dungeon for that long is going to happen. So maybe 1-1 or 1-2, you're going to meet a scout, a goblin, who's going to be like, and run away. Or you're going to have a giant rat come and eat one of your supplies. That's the kind of idea. But if you have like 6 ones and twos, then perhaps the cave wall behind you or the ceiling behind you collapses and now your characters are trapped. This is a neat way to handle the danger of staying inside a dungeon for a really long time. It gives you a randomness to it that I think is a lot more fun than just the 1d6 rolls that I grew up with in Basic Expert and I'm still using in Basic Fantasy, as fun as those actually are. But it's a neat way to handle the tension of being in a dangerous situation. I love how they did that. This is something I might want to import into my old school games because it's really neat. However, while Adventurous soars as a dungeon crawling, it's also really neat as a wilderness adventuring tool. You're going to have a central dice pool, but it's not going to be ranged by time. Instead, it's going to be ranged by the types of actions that you take and the types of journeys that you take. So if you're taking a short journey to the next village, for example, or maybe one overnight journey, it's going to be 1 die that you add to the central pool. If you're going to have a long journey, 2 or 3 nights, you're going to stick 2 in the central pool. If you're going to scout ahead or you're going to try to attempt a lookout move before you get moving for the day, that's going to be a knowledge check. And if you fail, that's going to add a die to the pool. In addition to all this, if you're moving through difficult terrain like really rugged hills or a deep, dense forest, you're going to add 1 die to the pool every time you do so. Foraging, if you run out of supplies, that also adds another die to the pool because you're staying in one spot. That means something bad can happen to you as you stick in one area. Similar to the way the dungeon works, the maximum of the pool is 6 dice, and you are going to roll when that hits 6, and you're going to count ones and twos. The higher number of ones and twos that are counted, the worse the consequences for your journey. A lot of tension, a lot of different things that can add to it. You're going to have risk reward. Do I stay here and try to fix this shield and spend the day here? I'm going to just add a die because we've run out of supplies and I got to go foraging. What do we do? Really, really cool. And a GM is not necessarily left on their own in order to come up with what these hazards are inside the dungeon. From pages 96 to 97, there's some excellent example tables for hazards and encounters for both wilderness and dungeon. I love everything about how this is set up. Adventurous is a no-nonsense design. It is a half US letter style book, 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. Well, 8.5 by 5.5. You know what I mean. It is compact and readable, not quite as short as digest-sized books like Shadow Dark or OSE, but it's also a little narrower. It is print on demand, however, so it is a glued binding. It's not going to fall flat as much as a stitched binding book. There's also no book ribbon in the book. That kind of makes me a little sad because I do love my book ribbons so much. But the paper is flat, so everything is so easy to read. There's no glare. It is also thick. You're not worried about bending it every time you flip a page. So this book should stick around for a while. The interior layout is absolutely beautiful. And talking to Sebastian, much of the effort and much of the funding went into the layout, and it actually shows. The layout was done by Matteo Schutere. I hope I got that right. He is from Italy, so this is an international cooperation. Love that idea. And I love the fonts that they chose. The heading fonts are this medieval looking, kind of rugged, dangerous looking font. The headings are brown ink, which is kind of cool. That was far more commonplace for ink back in the day than black. So that's a really nice touch. The body text is a very nice, clean serif font. It may be a tad too small, but I didn't have too much difficulty reading it, and also the fact that there are generous margins on the left and right of the page help make the smaller text be a lot more readable. It is not a dense text wall of small text, just a little bit more difficult to read in lower light for folks with older eyes like me. But what I love about how the text is laid out is my brain isn't skipping over the page wondering where to look because it is very direct and I know how the page is supposed to flow. Love that. Headings and footers for the page reside actually in the outer margin area. There is kind of a banner flowing down from the top, and this is going to feature the key topic for that page. There is a diamond on the bottom of the page that is going to have the page number inside it. That's going to use the heading style text. So it looks very unified and very clean. Example text is set against a light grained background. Often it's going to have a thin line on the left, further differentiating itself from the rest of the main text. Tables are simple and they are beautiful. Headers use the heading text. They are thrown against the black accent color of the book. Really looks cool. Borders are a simple brown color and it's just going to be a thin line around the table body. The body itself is going to be an alternating gray color for different rows, and it's going to use that body font text. It is readable, it is fast, it is absolutely lovely. Creature stack blocks are simple and beautiful as well. There's an opening paragraph on each of the pages for the nature of that creature. Each variant is presented in a table shaped like a shield. The armor and heart values for the creature are called out in the first row of each monster instance. The number is set in a heart for health and in a shield for armor rating. Very easy to follow. Attacks in this game are random. Now, Sebastian is from Sweden, so they would have had the precursor of the current Dragonbane. This would have been something that I think would be part of his background. I'm going to ask and check. Probably should have done that before I recorded this. But Dragonbane hooked me on the concept of having the monster attacks be random, because it's just this is what they do this turn. I'm not constantly trying to think what they're doing the next round. And it makes monsters so unpredictable and dangerous. I love that it's included inside Adventurous. For the artwork in this game, Sebastian made an interesting decision. He had a small budget, he wasn't doing any fundraising, and he decided to put his funds into doing a stellar layout. And it does show. This is a very readable book. So what he did is he took the artwork from free sources and he's using it in compliance with the license. So there's no AI artwork in this book. And if you go to his website, you can get the image credits from Dawnfist Games. What I actually would like to see on that page, however, is a link to the individual image credits listed, even though it's not required by any of the licenses that he is using. It's just a good way to nod to the artist whose work he is using for this book. But I do have to say that the way he's used these different images from different artists to pull in is presented really, really well. He passed it through a filter, which lifted them from being just more stock images, yay, and made them look like they were actually part of the book. They fit. That is not easy to pull off, and I'm kind of impressed that he managed to do it. Like I said, I would like to see individual shoutouts for the artists that he does use, and my desire for the future is that Dawnfist Games would continue to iterate this game and maybe crowdfund at some point to have an edition with commissioned art. This game has got a lot going for it, and it's worth doing that. They know what's needed now. They know exactly what places and which artwork they can fit on what pages, so it's not going to be that hard to go out and commission artists to do this. It could result in a really fast turnaround. And for folks who purchased the free art version, that can continue to be made available for updates to the text and errata. But for people who want that paid for art, and I would be one of them, I would buy this book in a second if it had commissioned art for a stitched binding edition, something to put out for that. And I think that would work out well. I mean, you do have books like Mutant Future, which have a no art version, so why not a free art version of the book as well? And as you get into using the Kickstarter or for a more funded version with commissioned art and maybe a little bit tweaked to the layout, you can make this other one either really, really, really cheap or free. That's something that I would consider for the future Dawnfist games because they are using people's art, and art deserves to be purchased, and this is a game that deserves to have its own artwork in it. That's just my thought for them. There are some things that Adventurous should address. I've already talked about moving forward with commissioned art would be something I would love to see them do. Changing the language from race to ancestries is also something that would be beneficial for the game. But the game itself could benefit from more editing. There are several typos in the book. Sometimes they can't decide what they're going to use as the generic profile or pronoun. Sometimes it uses he as the generic. Other times it refers to characters as it. And then creatures are always referred to with they. This is probably a language barrier solution coming from Swedish over into English. At least that's what I would surmise. It would benefit the book just to go with a singular they for the whole book. It would be consistent throughout the book, and it's a very simple fix. There is also some language confusion inside the books. It uses the term creature for both characters and monsters in the combat section. This is technically accurate, but the common usage of creatures usually refers to monsters. So a lot of times as I was reading through the combat section, I had to check my brain to go, oh no, they're talking about things the characters are doing as well. This is not just for the creatures. So what I would actually suggest in that instance is actually to call everyone in combat a combatant. That becomes a lot more clear because that is everyone involved in the combat. As for the layout, it is generally stellar. I love it, but there are quite a number of orphans. That's lines of text with a single word on it as well. This is something that I think another reading of the text, just to go through and look for those things, could help resolve. And a little bit of a language shift would get rid of those orphans, and it might give you a little more room to put some cool more text in there. Those are some tweaks that I would do to the game. Those tweaks aside, Adventurous is an amazing addition to the TTRPG space, and I put it right up there with Easy D6 for ease of use and teachability. And in fact, because Magic uses the exact same mechanic as everything else in the game, it's probably easier, although it lacks Easy D6's Gonzo charm. But Adventurous, even though it lacks the Gonzo charm, has character progression built into the game and these amazing crawling mechanics that make it even more fun. I'm really torn as to what game I like better at this point. And yeah, I do think it needs further editing for English style, but English, as I said, isn't Sebastian's native tongue, and I can't speak a lick of another language, much less write a game in it, so take my critiques of English language style with a little bit of a grain of salt. If you want to pick up Adventurous for yourself, you can go to DriveThruRPG, pick up the PDF for $8.50. You can get a hardback print on demand for $35.95, and the combo pack is actually $1 more. So if you want to get the PDF and the hardback, it's $36.95. It is not a huge amount of money that you are paying in order to get this game. This is a game that you would want to pick up the PDF for at least just to check out. It is really good. And thank you, Sebastian, for sharing it with me and trusting me to do the review of the game. It's really a blast. I'm running this at some point. This might be the next game that I run a one-shot for because it's cool, simple, fast. So coming up on the channel, I am currently reading 2 RPGs. The first is No Thank You Evil by Monty Cook Games because my little one wants to play it desperately and keeps asking me, are we playing Thank You No Evil yet? And I still need to get through the book. It is a simple, kind of a light version of the Cipher system, which I do enjoy running, so I am trying to get through that as fast as I can so I can review it and play it with my little one. At the same time, I am also finally reading Marvel's Multiverse TTRPG. My initial look at this was not favorable. It is a really crunchy game. However, I was looking at the context in which I was reading the book, and I realized I had just finished Adventurous, which is about as simple mechanically as you can get, and then jumped to Marvel Multiverse, which is somewhere on the other side of the spectrum, and I realized, oh wait, my expectations need to be adjusted. So I'm trying to read it piecemeal as I read some more crunchy material and get used to that style of writing and playing again, and hopefully I'll have Marvel Multiverse up for review rather soon. And then on the 25th of this month at noon, I am going to be chatting with Bob Worldbuilder. I am so interested to talk with him. Really want to talk about his experiences at PAX U this year because he had some unique ones and I am extremely jealous of what he encountered, and that should be an absolute blast. So until we see each other again, folks, happy playing, everyone.